Good afternoon, everyone online, and we have around here the drone startup founders, and I've been asked to talk on this topic of drone startup ecosystem. I'll actually go broader than just talking about drone startup ecosystem. What we have here is what is an ecosystem? This is the question. But what we will try to do right at the end is to try and answer the question why startups fail. Okay, just said that over 80% of startups, they don't make it to 24 months. But for now, we just wanted to hold the thought. Okay, just a brief overview of the drone industry. It's an industry that is expected to reach about 42 billion by 2024. And it's an industry that is growing in sectors like agriculture, energy, and it's making inroads, particularly in areas like security. We know our SOEs, some SOEs like Transnet are using security in a big way. We know the Western Cape Department of Health, EMS section, has been using drones. There was a story of a search and rescue operation that they did around Table Mountain. So the drone industry is growing by leaps and bounds. And we believe in our company that we are in the decade of the drone. Okay. You can see those year-on-year growth figures. I mean, this was just about 2018, but these numbers are growing by leaps and bounds, and the drone industry is really taking off in a number of areas. However, the worrying factor is that Africa is still lagging. If you see the graph on top, whereby Africa, yes, South Africa, we're beginning to use drones in a big way. I like when they talk about drones, people will always say, look at what Rwanda is doing. But I think in South Africa, we're using drones, particularly in the commercial and industrial space, in a big way. And it's use cases that you have not seen in some of the markets like Rwanda, Ghana, and Kenya. Okay. It's very important that we put the growth of the drone industry in perspective. We're all familiar with the Gartner's hype cycle curve, where technology will trigger and peak in what we call the peak of inflated expectations. And then this graph will go right down into the trough of disillusionment. I mean, we've seen technologies like blockchain, 3D printing, you know, there was a peak of inflated expectations, but the reality begin to sink in. The big area that, for instance, that begins to sink in this country is probably the whole fourth industrial revolution. There was a big hype around it, but people are beginning to ask, is this fourth industrial revolution going to put bread on the table or not? Okay. However, if you look at any product life cycle and technology adoption life cycle, this is from a book written by Jeff Moore, whereby he says there is a chasm between the early adopters and early majority. Now, you need to understand who are early adopters. Early adopters and innovators, these are the people who are put in some corner office in big corporates. They're responsible for innovation. You guys are going to get us to do things better, get things different. But then you've got the early majority and the late majority. These are the people who form like 2/3 of the users out there, the customers out there. These are the guys who are saying, you know what, we understand this drone technology, it's great, but we want a total solution. Until such time that you got a solution, come back to us. But for now, thanks, but no thanks. And in the drone industry, the people who are taking an interest, a big interest in the industry, are still the innovators and early adopters. However, if you see that graph where I say this is where we are, we have turned the corner from a hockey stick point of view. We're now in the growth phase. Even the early majority are beginning to say, this technology is something that is worth looking at, and they're beginning to warm up to this technology. And we are saying this is where things really happen. If you look at the cell phone industry has reached even the late majority, the people who are skeptical. Who were skeptical, they realized that, hey, in order for me to connect with people, I really have to get into that space. Okay, so let's go back to the ecosystem. What constitutes an ecosystem? Obviously, this term comes from biology. Okay, in biology, I mean, this is biology 101. Okay, you've got what we call the abiotic factors and the biotic factors. The biotic factors, it's the living organisms, including ourselves, okay? We need, on the left-hand side, we need those abiotic factors like oxygen, light, and plants need carbon dioxide, we need oxygen. And on the right-hand side, you've got the food chain, you know? When you mess up with that food chain, this is where, for instance, some species have become extinct because you're messing up with the food chain. What has this got to do with the startups? Let's see. For an ecosystem to function optimally, there has to be a very good balance with the coexistence of some of these factors. An example of this is that's why at some point there was a time in the 80s when the Minister of Tourism had said, look, we have too many elephants in the Kruger. We had to cull some of the elephants. You know, people don't understand, why do you have to do that? Because in the jungle, there has to be a balance, particularly as far as the food chain is concerned. Otherwise, some species will not be able to survive if that balance is not there. So you don't want too much supply of one factor. If I can just give an example, as much as we need rain, we don't want too much of it. As much as we need sun, we don't want too much of it. We just want the right balance of all the factors. And that is what is required in a startup ecosystem. Let's look at what happens, for instance, in an ecosystem. Again, here we are still talking about the startup, the biological ecosystem. You know, what causes those imbalances? Drought, flooding, rising CO2 levels, deforestation, you know, and you get the living organisms either thriving or surviving. If there's a good balance, they will thrive. But if the balance is not there, they will battle to survive. Okay, this is the situation where startups find themselves in. They're finding themselves trying to survive because there's not a good balance of some of the factors. Let's go to those factors now. What are they? Okay, now, how do we take these laws of nature and translate them into a startup ecosystem? And what is a startup ecosystem? Okay, first of all, let's describe it. It's formed by people, startups, and in their various stages of growth in a physical or a virtual interacting as a system to create and scale new startup companies. Okay. Just as you've got the biological ecosystem, startups need to thrive within a proper ecosystem with a good balance of all the factors. And what are those factors? We talk of factors and actors. Factors could be if you look at the biological ecosystem, those are the abiotic factors like the sun, the rain, all those factors that we need for the actors to flourish or to thrive. Okay. By the way, on the right-hand side, sorry, they're not abiotics, they're biotic actors. These are entrepreneurs, these are people, these are angel investors, venture capitalists, mentors, higher education institutions, incubators, accelerators. These are actors that are driven by people. On the left-hand side, you obviously got the factors that are required, like finance, talent, knowledge base. Without a proper knowledge base, particularly if you're talking about the technology ecosystem, without the proper knowledge base and the supply of that knowledge base, which are higher education institutions, do you have the co-working spaces? You know, do you have the support structures? Do you have an open market? What makes Cape Town so different to the rest of the country is because they have a clear abundance of co-working spaces. They've got a clear abundance of educational institutions. You've got some of the top universities there. You even have the graduate school of business of UCT that is working on developing its own startup accelerator program. Okay. On the right-hand side, you need a supply of venture capitalists, people who are not risk averse, people who are prepared to take risks on small startups. And again, you need incubators, you need accelerators. There's one that we've launched. I'm surrounded here by founders of drone startup accelerators who are looking to integrate drone technology into the work that they do. Okay, let's look at the domains of a startup ecosystem. This was developed by Eisenberg, one of the scholars in this space who have looked at what makes a startup ecosystem work? We know that the best ecosystem in the world, and by far, it's the one in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area around San Francisco. And by the way, no one has been able to replicate what's happening at Silicon Valley. And instead of trying to create another Silicon Devon, Silicon this, why don't we create something that is unique to Durban, something that mirrors the environment within Durban? So he said, these are the 6 domains of a startup ecosystem. You've got a policy, finance, culture, support, human capital, and the markets, which are very, very important within a startup ecosystem. Let's look at them in greater detail one by one. Okay, the first one is the policy. This is the domain of spheres of government, whether it's a municipality that has put together bylaws, whether it's provincial government that has put together some acts, and or national government. And those policies that they put in, government has got policies like the BE policies, they've got certain policies that are meant to help the small businesses. But policy alone, we're very, very good in policy in government in this country. We're very, very good in policy. It's a question of how workable are some of these policies. But for policy to work, they need the other domains. Let's look at the first one. It's finance. Okay. Do we have the right financial markets like lenders, microloans, angel investors, venture capitalists, private capital, and public capital markets? Do we have a clear abundance of these markets? Okay. We see in South Africa, most of the venture capitalists and angel investors are flocking to Western Cape. And that is why that in itself, it's a clear indication of a growth in the startup ecosystem, which is very, very important. The next one is the culture. I mean, before this morning, we spoke about whether in South Africa, do we have a culture of entrepreneurship? Do our parents, do we take our kids to school in order for them to be entrepreneurs? The answer is no. We train them to either become engineers, we train them to either become doctors because we've glorified those professions because they are noble professions. It's a different matter when you go into Stanford University in the Silicon Valley, because when people go there, that's why some of them, they end up not even finishing their degrees, because they want to get out there into the marketplace and start making money, because there is a culture of entrepreneurship. Even those that don't go into business themselves, they want to work for a startup. They want to work for a startup that has closed a Series A funding or a Series B funding, because that is the exciting moment. You know, when you work, for instance, for a company like Airbnb, when it started, there's nothing as exciting as that. I mean, it trumps working for Google, it trumps working for Apple, some of those global giants. So the culture that we need in South Africa, it's a culture that we can inculcate even from an early age, to teach a child to be entrepreneur, to be able to know what they can do. What do our kids do when school closes? Do they think about, hey, if I can sell this to my friends and do this? No, we're not teaching them that. So that culture is missing. What are the support structures? Okay, government has created quite a number of support structures. We've got incubators. I mean, CEDA has got almost 100 incubators now. They're creating digital hubs. They're creating this and this. And we need accelerators. We need coaches. We need mentors who can be able to support these budding startups to be able to grow their business into another level. Again, things like broadband internet. Okay, you can take it for granted. Right now, also things like stable electricity. And I'm glad here at Innovate Devon, we have generator. Otherwise, we would be in darkness, because we are under load shedding now and we are operating now. Awesome. You need a proper infrastructure, just a proper banking system for you to be able to make international transactions, even local transactions. You need that. It's critical. Okay, Danny will help me with the question. Thanks. Higher education. This is human capital. Very, very critical. You know, I had a chat, for instance, with Professor Mtaung from the Devon University of Technology. And I've interacted with the former Deputy VC, Prof. from Jigganess, who's now, we've lost him now to Stellenbosch. I don't know how you guys let him go to Stellenbosch, a great guy. But we need a supply of good talent, educated talent that can take and look at the work of the future, because the businesses that will take us into another level, it's all these new technologies. And drone technology is just but one of those technologies. Lastly, it's the markets. Okay, can you access the markets? And when we talk markets, we're not talking local markets, we're talking about export markets. We are now in the global village. You need to be able to sell your products to whoever is in the world. And that person must be able to transact with you wherever they are, and without you having to go and sell your products there. And we know in South Africa, the unfortunate thing is that we are just a market for people's technologies. You know, we are not very good at developing our own technologies, but that must change. Some of the technologies, some of the IPs that are sitting in research institutions and universities, they need to find way into the commercialization space so that these founders of startups can be able to turn those into marketable businesses. So why do startups fail? This is the question that I think when we leave here, we need to be able to answer and say, why do they fail? After all the support that they get, after all the support with the ecosystems like this one, Innovate Devon, after having events like Innovation Festival, why do startups still fail? Okay, goes back to the ecosystem. Is the ecosystem, do we have a good balance? Okay, now let's look at what we call the value of death of startups. You know, we look at that red part there where most of the startups don't even see their way out of that red zone. We call it the value of death. Okay, this is where you bootstrap your startup. Sometimes you don't even get angel investment. By the way, that FFF stands for friends, family, and fools who will give you money without knowing where the money is going to come back. Okay, you use all your savings there. Some people who have been retrenched, they take all their life savings and put them there. Some of them, they mortgage their houses because they think there's going to be a windfall of profits, and they end up with nothing. And they have to go back and try and look for a job. Okay, and they're indebted. Very few of them move out to the break-even point and start clinching the first stages of funding, Series A, Series B, right up to IPO. Okay, if you look at this research was done by Greylock Partners, one of the great VC firms based in New York. Okay, they said, what is it that caused startups to fail? Now, if you look, most of the reasons that causes startups to fail has got to do with the market. And this is the ones that I've highlighted. Okay, now I'm saying the first one is that we built a product for which there's no market. In South Africa, in the technology space, they like just building apps and say, what are you working on? Hey, I'm building an app. Okay, so what problem are you solving? No, I'm building an app. Okay, someone is going to this app. I'm going to build it. People are going to subscribe. I'm going to get money. You know, they're going to subscribe to it. All I need is just for them to pay me 100 rands a month. Okay, so what product are you solving? What problem are you solving? Now, all of those that I've highlighted have got to do with the problem that you're solving. So 6 out of 10 reasons for failure has to do with the market. You are building a product for which there's no market. You probably have not even spoken to anybody in the marketplace. If you read the book called The Mom's Test, is that everyone who says, I want to go into business, if you go to your mom and say, Mom, I want to go into business, your mom says, hey, you are a great boy. I raised a great boy. You're gonna be a great businessman. And people will buy from you. And then the person who does not buy from you happens to be your mom as well. So that's the mom's test, but which is a very wrong test. That is 60% of products fail to solve the customer's number one problem or need, okay? Or maybe there was no problem or need after all. You know what we call this? We call this the SISP, a solution in search of a problem. Okay, it's a solution, but it's in search of a problem. Sometimes it's ahead of its time, or the problem will never, its time will never come because of that. Let's look at the funding cycle of startups. They grow from bootstrapping, friends and family grants, alternative funding, angels, VCs, IPOs. However, the majority of startups, they don't go past there. They don't go past there, all because they've built they have a product for which there's no market. And probably even if there is a market, they have a completely wrong business model in terms of how to access that market. Okay, our response to this conundrum, we're not planning that we're going to do the best we can, but we've created this 12-week accelerator program for Innovate Devon, which we've got these great young people behind me. And for the next 11 weeks, we've just launched this morning. For the next 11 weeks, we're going to work module 1 to say, let's start with problem solution fit before we even build any solution or product. And we're going to build the minimum viable product. And we're going to do market validation. We're going to take this product into the marketplace and say to the market, do you like this product? And the test of that is for them to be able to even pay for that product. And then once we've done the validation, we're then going to develop a go-to-market strategy, which looks at things like the marketing strategy, sales, product visioning, and how you develop a business around a product. Because it's one thing to develop a viable product, but it's another to build a company, a viable company around that particular product. Lastly, the last 2 weeks we're going to spend on pitching, on training the group on how to pitch their businesses to potential investors and also to potential funders. Okay, these are our partners. This is one of our companies that we are partnering with. It's Nafasi. It's one of our alumni. This company is doing well. It's found traction in the marketplace. They're doing amazing stuff in the mining space and also in the built environment. And again, we are working with Innovate Devon, who's our partner for this, and Tita from a training point of view. Most of these startups are also going to be going to be drone pilots. We're also working with CSIR, particularly the built environment, looking into the research part element of it. Our press is helping us with training academy. And lastly, these are organized. Some of these companies that we had last year. Last year, it was a 20-week program. We learned a lot out of this program last year. We ran for it for the first 7 weeks, and then we went into hard lockdown. You guys probably forget how hard lockdown was then. So we ran the last 18 weeks under lockdown. Some of these companies have gained traction. One of these companies, Pragmatic Master, has closed a Series A funding, and they're doing great. They're doing great work. I think in this program, you guys will meet some of these founders who are doing amazing work within this environment. In the final analysis, as is the case with living organisms, startups are living organisms, and they will thrive. They thrive in an ecosystem that has a balanced supply of factors and actors that work in unison towards the common goal. An oversupply of one factor will not help. We need to strike a very, very good balance. Government can't be the only ones that are funding startups to get them out of their bootstrap situation. That has to be matched or de-risking some of the VC funding who are still risk averse to bring them into this common goal. Ultimately, our end goal is for us to develop a sustainable drone tech and startup ecosystem for Mzansi, but also within the Devon space. On this note, thank you very much for listening to me, and over to you, Daniela. I'm happy to take any questions, and some of the questions, I've got a live audience here. there's a mic if some of them want to ask questions. But I've been with these guys for the whole morning. We're still going to be with them for another hour. But we're more than happy to take any questions from your side. And there could be some of the questions that have come through on the online chat. Over to you, Daniel.
Hi there, Victor.
Yes.
Yes. Currently, we do not have any questions that have come through. Therefore, we do encourage people to add on Q&As so that Victor can address them.
Okay. On that note, I've got some people around me here whom you may not see. Any questions? Questions? So it was clear as mud. So on the Daniela, I'm at your mercy.
Sorry, Victor, please repeat.
I'm saying I'm at your mercy. There's no question on the online audience here.
Absolutely nothing. It was definitely clear as mud.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think if there are no questions, we're good to go.